Like and subscribe right now, or this will be in your bed tonight. My roommate is a felon, spent quite a few years behind bars. The only story he told me was, there was a young new guy in the prison. He was placed in the cell next to my roommate, and the new guy's cellmate decided he liked this new guy. Like really liked him, but as it turned out, new guy didn't share the same feelings as his cellmate. Eventually, my roommate got tired of hearing this new guy get raped night after night, so when the chance presented itself, him and quite a few others went and told the neighbor that he was going to discontinue forcefully putting his penis inside the new guy, as they were tired of listening to it. He got a bit vague on how they told him, but I feel it involved a bit more than words. While waiting in a holding cell with about 20 inmates for hearings, to finish my offense was non-violent, victimless. A few of them are chatting. There are media cameras set up in the courtroom and many of us groaned at the thought of popping up on TV. All summer long a rapist had been terrorizing one of the most popular parks in my city. He had many victims, some that had been killed. All the victims were young women. Even inside, it was quite infamous. As the inmates were chatting, one of the older guys' heads perks up. "Hey you." He points to a quiet guy in the corner. "I recognize you from the paper. This is the rapist from the park." Everyone stops and turns. Keep in mind this holding cell is about 8x15 and there are 20 plus full grown men crammed inside. The accused denies it, and after being pressed by everyone, admits that he is in fact this serial rapist/murderer. One of the older convicts tenses up and explains that his daughter's best friend was one of his victims and that she was 15 at the time. Fury ensues. Two tall guys stand in front of the windows at the front of the cell to block the camera. Two guys grab the rapist and shove to the center of the small cell. It all seemed like everyone had done this before. I back up into the toilet nook. I'm no criminal looking to do more time, nor am I violent in any fashion. The guy who was talking about knowing a victim pulls him close by the neck and starts spewing about what scum he is and how he has no problem doing more time to end the rapist life. The rapist, who may or may not have been mentally handicapped, was terrified, shaking. The guy started to choke him while others were kicking him. It only lasted half a minute before guards came to the windows and started screaming that everyone inside would be charged with additional felonies if it didn't stop. Luckily, for my sake, they did, and the guards yanked the rapist out to put him in his own cell. Hours later, we get back to the jail. During dinner, the rapist gets destroyed in the gym, just a big room, while everyone else goes on lockdown. The guards just watched as two Samoan brothers fucked this rapist up. So much blood. The guards came in force once the brothers settled down. They were hauled off along with the totally mangled rapist. A mod worker inmate spent the rest of the evening cleaning the blood out of the gym. The Samoan brothers were cheered as they were escorted out of the mod. I was informed that when they return to Gen Pop mods, they will be rewarded by other inmates for their deeds. I worked at a prison. We had this guy who said he was in for murder. One day the inmates find out he was really in for raping to death his week-old daughter. Not sure how they did it, but they literally broke his dick. It was ruptured. He could not walk without assistance for a few months. Also, it swelled up to horrific size. He was not enjoying life. Honestly, the only thing that keeps pedophiles alive in prison is Noon is willing to trade 20 years or so of their time for the pleasure of ending the pedophiles. Not an ex-prisoner, but have a relevant story. A prison in my town had a riot, and it is known that all sorts of shit goes on in a riot. People killing each other, smashing everything that can be smashed. They even found a couple of high security doors, inches thick of solid steel, torn off and thrown. In one particular riot, the prisoners managed to get hold of a set of keys, and their first instinct was to try and break into the unit where all the vulnerable people are kept, that is, pedophiles, rapists, those who are at risk from the other prisoners. Many of the people in those units, once they realized what was going on, were hanging themselves before the other prisoners managed to get to them. I cannot imagine what they would do that would make hanging yourself better. About 15 years ago I was locked up for pulling a gun on someone in a drug deal gone wrong. Since it was my first offense, I was young and wasn't a problem prisoner. I got a job inside on the cleaning crew. My job at the time was to go into the showers with this high pressure spray bottle and spray down everything with cleaning chemicals. I did this on every block in the prison, including the secure housing units. There were two of those, one for people in the hole and the other for new inmates on quarantine and protective custody inmates. There was an inmate who came in who was caught in the act by the girl's mother molesting her daughter. It was all over the newspapers, so everyone knew his name and what he looked like. 2 days after he arrived I went in to clean the shoe blocks. I recognized him as I walked past his cell towards the shower. On the way back out of the cell block, I shuffled through the cell block looking towards the pod where the co's were and, upon seeing that they weren't looking, stopped in front of his cell and sprayed chemicals all over him and his bed through the bars. When I finished, I turned around to start walking out and both of the co's were looking directly at me. I froze like a deer in the headlights because I figured I had just lost all my privileges and would probably get another 3 to 6 months to serve. One of them just gave me an approving nod and went back to reading his paper. There is no such thing as protection for baby rapists. My ex-boyfriend has been to jail countless times, hence why he's an ex. The one time he was placed in shackles that were connected by chains to about 10 other inmates. They all had their court date at the same time, so during their trials all of them were present and could hear everything being said. Among the inmates there was an old man in his 60s who was being tried for molesting his young granddaughter. He told me, as soon as they were all put back on the transport bus, the other inmates, including him, kept smashing the old man's handcuffs down to the point his wrists were bloody and bruised. I was in local county lockup. They weren't in isolation, unless it was due to a previous altercation. They also had different colored name tags which made them easy pickings. Once the rapists entered the pod they would have their stuff packed by the other inmates and the items would be put by the door. If the rapist didn't leave the pod there was hell to pay. All 60 to 100 of us would unite and try to get the person to leave. The guards turned their backs and we kicked the shit out of them. Never to the point of an attempted murder, but always past the point of simple battery. This happened a couple times a week, and it gave us something to unite. It was beautiful watching an Aryan and an African American kick the shit out of someone together. Brings tears to my eyes lol. I did a couple months in Dallas County. I was in the West Tower section of the jail with all the crazes. A couple days in this white boy got transferred to our tank point which was a 8-man tank, 7 Mexicans and this white guy who just got in. He was in his early 20s. Well, when he arrived he was already beat up with a black eye and multiple cuts and bruises. So the first few days he stayed to himself and barely got out of bed only for food. Eventually he starts coming around and me and a couple of the homeboys ask him about his injuries. So he tells us about how he was in another tank with 4 black guys and 3 other white guys. Well, one of these peckerwoods asked him what he was in for. Well, his response was, "I rather not talk about it." Well, naturally they were curious. So they grabbed his commissary bag, check his court paper where they find out he is a chomo child molester. Which we find out from him later he was touching his 13-year-old stepsister. This is when one of the black guys start beating on him, then the rest of the tank joins in. Kicking, punching, pissing on him all, while he's crying like a bitch. Then they made him lick mayo off the seat of the toilet. My favorite thing to see done to those pieces of shit rapists and pedos were what I called piss bombs. We would get rice from commissary, and it would come in Ziploc bags. As soon as it was empty people would begin to piss into them. Once full they would wait until the scumbags would lock themselves into their cells, slip the top of the bag under the door, and jump on the bag spraying piss, sometimes shit, spit, blood, and rotten food all over them in their cells. The smell was horrific, but they deserve everything they can get. Also, if you wet paper you can turn them into weapons so hard they resemble a small bat. They would hide in their cells, but get piss thrown on them, spit on, and beat on until they got moved to maximum security. Also all of the inmates in the kitchen would spit in and mess with their food. Not that it matter, if the scummers were in Gen Pop they weren't getting any grub anyway, and the co's don't give a shit about the low lives. I did 30 days in a county lockup for some random BS when I was in college. Most of the guys I was with were serial DUI guys, or assault/battery type stuff. No real murderers or anything, but certainly a few badasses in there. Anyway, couple weeks in a new guys gets let in the block, heads to the open cot. It wasn't more than an hour or two and the guy who was sharing the bunk with him got his charges out of him. He ran around telling everyone this guy was a pedophile and that's why he was in there. Within the hour, the 2 alphas of the group had him cornered and were making him feel very uncomfortable. For those of you who don't know, there's a button intercom on the wall in a large cell block. You press the button, and the guard answers. The 12th threw all his shit on the ground and told him, in no uncertain terms, you better go press that button, and get the fuck out to here, or you may not make it to dinner. The guy walked over, pressed the button, and told the officer he feared for his life. He was moved, I assumed to solitary, and I never saw him again as I was released a couple weeks later. Crazy shit. That was a decade ago, and I'll never forget it. Thanks for watching. Greaseball, like and comment. Subscribe. I love you.